Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Theo. Thank you so much for being here. I'm doing a video that is a little bit overdue, and that is my spoiler-free review of Christopher Ruoccio's Empire of Silence. I'm lucky enough to have both the UK and the US hardcover editions, and I just want to start off by saying how incredibly impressive theyese covers are. I mean, they're beautiful. I obviously got the UK cover before I was able to get my hands on the US one, and I actually don't know which one I prefer. What do you guys think? I think they're both incredible. The art is great. It gives off the, epic space saga kind of vibes that this book is all about. They're just so beautiful. I'm lucky enough to have both. I was gifted this one by a really generous friend of mine. So thank you so much. I love having these on the shelves, and I'm so happy that I finally was able to read these in our read along that happened this past July. I ended up giving this one a 4.5 star is what I settled on, and I really enjoyed my time with it. I have very, very minor criticisms, but overall I had a blast, and I can't wait to read the next book. If you want to stick around and hear what I liked about it, and if I think you should read it, stick around. I'll put timestamps in there so you can jump ahead if you like to. So let's start with, what is this book about? Hadrian Marlowe, a man revered as a hero and despised as a murderer, chronicles his tale in the galaxy-spanning debut of the Sun Eater series, merging the best of space opera and epic fantasy. It was not his war. The galaxy remembers him as a hero, the man who burned every last alien Cielson from the sky. They remember him as a monster, the devil who destroyed a sun, casually annihilating 4 billion human lives, even the emperor himself, against imperial orders. But Hadrian was not a hero. He was not a monster. He was not even a soldier. On the wrong planet, at the right time, for the best reasons, Hadrian Marlowe starts down a path that can only end in fire. He flees his father and a future as a torturer, only to be left stranded on a strange, backwater world. Forced to fight as a gladiator and navigate the intrigues of a foreign planetary court, Hadrian must fight a war he did not start for an empire he does not love against an enemy he will never understand. So this series has always been touted as a sci-fantasy or science fiction fantasy series, and I love that description, because what we have here is a book and sort of the beginning of a story that is really approachable for fantasy readers. We're teased with what will likely end up a very epic, sprawling space saga, but the world feels familiar enough. This book is actually very thought-provoking as well, and it touched on a lot of themes, and one of the themes that I enjoy the most is found family, and that was actually handled very well in this book. But there's also a lot of other interesting topics. It explores what it means to be human, the results of culture clashes, racism, slavery, hierarchy, and caste systems. It even touches on religion and sort of the implication on a broader scale of technology and what that means, for the world and the people in it. And so I think that these are going to be explored a lot more in depth in subsequent books, but there's a lot to sort of wrap your head around, and I really enjoyed all that. This book is definitely a setup book one for a very grand scale interplanetary, intergalactic space saga. And while there are hints of this almost, infinite universe and kind of infinite world, the story is actually fairly contained and feels quite intimate in kind of a good way. There were times when I was hoping we would kind of get going and, start exploring this whole world, but I'm sort of thankful that we didn't. I'm thankful that we took our time to kind of ease into this and start to understand the world and the characters. And it is a bit of a soft transition into this, story. We're not necessarily thrown blind into this, sprawling world that we don't understand. It was actually handled very, very well. And again, at times I sort of wanted to kind of, because there's this hint and there's this tease of this grander world that you're made aware of it and you want desperately to go and explore that. But it's very important how the story starts and where the story is contained, what characters we're following, and the fact that we get to understand the characters, the world, what's happening, where we are, in a little bit of a kind of sandbox playground for a bit. And I think that will pay dividends in future books. There's immediately some clear inspiration from works like Dune, for sure. I noticed those right away, but they don't continue. They kind of, the book does chart its own path, definitely. And the narrative structure will feel very familiar if you've read books like Name of the Wind. For me, I actually got stronger Robin Hobb, Farseer vibes, not just with the narrative structure, but also just with like the voice. Hadrian's telling his story as this, aged, older, wiser version of himself with the gift of hindsight. And I just got the same vibe and the same voice as like an older Fitz. We also have some indication that we have potentially an unreliable narrator. So that's going to actually make things quite interesting for future books too. The writing itself is gorgeous. It's some of the best writing I've read in the science fiction and fantasy genres. And his sentence structure, his words that he uses are all very deliberate. And everything just feels very, very impressive. I actually found myself rereading passages quite frequently just because I love the way that it sounded. I will say that there are times where I felt like the prose was a little bit flowery, and I felt like it could have been maybe toned down just a little bit for the benefit of the story and maybe the pacing and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, I was super impressed, and I wouldn't even really change anything. There were a couple parts where I felt like the prose was a little purple, but it's important to remember that Christopher Ruocchio sold this book when he was 22 years old. And I don't know about you guys, but when I was 22, I was not this cool. It makes sense that as a young writer, you would flex all your muscles and show, your writing prowess and come out hot right out of the gate to show that you belong in the big leagues. The author, Christopher Ruocchio, is such a down-to-earth, nice guy. He's active in the booktube community. He's on a bunch of discords, including ours, the Grimoire Discord, the link's in the description. He was really gracious with his time when we were doing the read along. He would pop in and check in on us once in a while. He would answer questions. I think he's going to kind of, be there for us as we continue with the read along, hopefully, if he's around. He's just a very down-to-earth guy. He's incredibly bright. He's so well read. Just listening to him interviewed, he's very impressive. He draws a lot from history and philosophy, and he's just someone who you just want to sit down and talk to and just pick their brain because you know that they're like way smarter than you. But yeah, his writing is just a joy to read, and it's also quite refreshing. The plot and pacing were also very good. The plot was a fairly strong plot. It kept me interested most of the way through. I would say the whole way through. There wasn't a whole lot of downtime. There were a couple parts where I felt like maybe it was a little bit overly long in certain areas, but again, this is a book one. It's supposed to set you up. And I feel like a lot of that time spent is going to pay dividends down the road with future books. So I actually can't even fault it for that. It just felt, it is a big book. I think it's a 700 and 25 page book. And there were times when I felt like it could have been cut down to maybe 600 pages. But even that, I feel like it was done for a reason. I would trust that someone as strong of a writer as Christopher Ruocchio knows better than I, what needs to be done. He has this story planned out and plotted. I can tell from a long time ago. He knows exactly where he's going. And I feel like this was done for a reason. I'm so excited to continue with the story. I think that that's a very good sign of a book when you wrap it up. If you can stay interested from beginning to end, and then as soon as you put it down, you continue to think about it and you can't quite wait to pick up the next one, that's a sign of a pretty good book. There were also a few twists as well in the story, and nothing that felt forced or unnatural, just a couple pivots in the story that were kind of interesting and made everything kind of fun. I thought the characters in this book were actually fun to follow, and I thought that they were all very well done. Most of them were very fleshed out. The character of Hadrian in particular is quite interesting. He's a tortured protagonist. He can be a little bit annoying at times. He's definitely complex. I like that we understand his motivations and we kind of know where he's coming from, even though his actions are sometimes questionable and maybe, you would do things differently. You kind of see where he's coming from, and you can't help but, empathize with him at times. Again, he can be kind of annoying, kind of dramatic, but I'm so interested to see how he grows and where he goes from here. I'm also very interested to read a little bit more about Crispin. I'm going to try and fit in the novella collection or short story collection, The Lesser Devil, which is from the point of view of Crispin. I think that's where we get a little bit of a hint that maybe Hadrian is an unreliable narrator, or maybe Crispin is, and we can kind of compare their points of view. That would be kind of interesting. But yeah, all the characters seemed, very fleshed out, even the ancillary characters. Some of them are, kind of just throwaways, as we have in every story, but a couple of them, I would say most of them, are very well fleshed out and serve kind of their purpose very well. There were a couple fairly emotional moments, actually, where, there were a couple characters I cared about quite a bit more than I thought I would, to be honest. So the characters were well done. Overall, I really enjoyed my time with this one. I'm thankful to have been able to read this with a bunch of friends and some of you guys. And I would 100% recommend this to, a science fiction or a fantasy reader. I really do think that Christopher Ruocchio is going to become a household name in the sci-fi, sci-fantasy genres. For traditional, fantasy readers, I would say that there's a lot to like here. You definitely have this grand sci-fi space saga starting to unfold, but there's enough to make you feel at home. There's enough to feel familiar, and there's plenty to like. As I mentioned, there were some really impactful emotional moments that really landed, actually more than I thought they would. I will warn you guys that there is one kind of torture scene that is not overly long, and it's actually very well done, but it can be a little bit graphic, so be warned about that. And there's also like a public execution kind of, which is just, a gut punch for sure. That was also handled quite well. But yeah, just a little bit of a warning in case those things turn you off. Maybe just go in a little bit more prepared. So to wrap up, overall, again, I gave it a 4.5 star. I really enjoyed my time with this. I can't, I was just waiting to read this one for so long, and I delayed it so long. I'm happy I finally got to it, and I'm happy we did it in a read along. If you haven't joined the Grimoire Discord, I'll go ahead and leave a link in the description. Me and my buddy Alex over at Tall Guy Reads, our two channels are kind of co-hosting this read along. We're going to be doing one a month, and we'd love to see you there. For those of you who did read it, I hope you guys had as much fun as I did. And I would love to hear your thoughts. If you've read this one, please let me know in the comments what you guys thought. That's it for me, guys. Just a quick review, and I will catch you guys on the next one.